Albert Breer, my friend from Sports Illustrated. He was kind enough to talk about the NFL Draft-a-thon and how we're trying to raise as much money for charity to fight COVID-19 and provide some relief for those who need it. He wrote about it in his MMQB, and Albert Breer joins us 2 days before the NFL Draft right now. How are you, Albert?
I'm doing good, Rich, and I promise I'll proofread better next time.
Yeah, it's okay.
I hate to screw up people's names.
I can't leave well enough alone, Chris, as you know. Plus, I like making people's lives better,
of course,
through me, right?
Sure.
And plus,
if not you, who?
And plus, for those who are constantly on deadline and writing like Albert, they need somebody with a University of Michigan diploma to proofread for them and be their own personal spell check.
Come on, Albert. You knew it was coming.
Well, hey, then I guess I'll just have to settle for what happens in late November then.
Yes, you can.
Hey.
I know. I think that's when they postpone the spelling bee too. I think that's what he's referring to. Okay. Yeah, there were a couple of spelling. And so I texted you, Albert, and you fixed it. So it's all good, man.
Oh, I appreciate. I actually did appreciate that.
That's what you get when you interview me for a column. I'll read it, I'll proofread it, and I'll always try to help. So, 2 days before the draft, where are we on the Joe Burrow front? There's still nothing afoot, right? This is going to happen. He's going to go to the Bengals, and he will be wherever he is, holding up a Bengals jersey or a hat in his home quarantine with his family, perhaps. That's what's going to happen Thursday night, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because he's been in Athens, Ohio for the last month. And, fortunate enough for him, a couple of his best friends from high school were twin brothers who were tight ends for Ohio University and just finished up there. And so he's had a couple of guys he's been able to throw to over the last few weeks and just sort of keeping himself in shape and everything else. There aren't going to be any surprises here. I can tell you going all the way back to really since the Combine, the Bengals have maxed out the allowable time with Burrow. And, as everything's been with Burrow up until now, it's really been more geared towards getting him ready to play quarterback in the NFL. He told me that he's sort of tried to use being the first pick or the presumptive first pick to his advantage, where he's not as worried about pro days or getting ready for the Combine or any of that. He's just really focused on getting himself ready to play in the NFL. My understanding of these meetings that he's had with the Bengals, and they're allowed, 3 1-hour Zoom meetings every week, have really been geared towards getting him ready to be the quarterback of the Bengals. So, I mean, unless this is all the biggest smokescreen we've ever seen, Joe Burrow is going to be the quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals on Thursday night.
And any chance Washington turns the number 2 overall pick into a who wants Tua, who wants Herbert, or that is just still so up in the air, it's going to be Chase Young 10 minutes in, and then we move on to that question for the Lions.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember talking to somebody at the Combine who's very close to Ron Rivera, who said, mark it down in Sharpie. He's taking Chase Young second overall. So I think that's been the plan all along. But I'll give Rivera and Kyle Smith and the guys there credit. I mean, really the idea here was to make sure that they had a full idea of the landscape. So that's why you look at Tua. I talked to somebody there who said, we just need to make sure we're not passing on Michael Jordan here. And then, I think the other benefit you get from kicking the tires on Tua is that maybe you smoke out an offer from somebody who gets a little uncomfortable when you're doing that. And, of course, then you maybe light a little fire under Dwayne Haskins. And so I think sort of the plan all along has been to take Chase Young second overall, which, I mean, could wind up really doing for them what drafting Bosa did for the Niners last year, where you have all these first-round picks in the defensive line group, and a generational talent comes in and sort of puts it over the top. I don't expect any surprises. I think, as we expected going all the way back to January, it's Burrow, it's Young, and then the draft really starts at 3.
Well, Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show. Suss out for me where the Tua question mark comes from. Is it all the hip? It's got to be, because for years, 2 years, he looks off the safety in a national championship game. He wins it. He wins the job from Jalen Hurts. And then now here we are after a year and a half of everybody basically saying how special this kid is. It's now time to draft him. And you're hearing some people say, Not all that. And as a matter of fact, lower body injury after lower body injury after lower body injury. And now here we are in the world of COVID-19, and doctors can't physically see him over. And so teams are going to get scared off. And then half the other people are saying he's still the bomb. So what's going on here?
I think his tape is special. In fact, the only question, on his tape, from the people I've talked to, there's the same arm strength question that you have with Burrow. But really, as far as how he played, the only question that I've really heard is, well, he had great players around him. So what's it going to look like when those windows are a little smaller and he's not throwing to a group that's so much better than 90% of the players they play against, and that's Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs and Devontae Smith and having 2 first-round tackles and all that different stuff. But, yeah, the injuries are really the question. It's not just a hip, Rich, it's a multitude of injuries. He got hurt in high school. He had the 2 tightrope surgeries on his ankles. That's a new surgery, so you don't know what that's going to look like 5-6 years down the line. And then there's the hip on top of it where you're not truly out of the woods as far as the blood flow issue until you get 9 to 12 months post-op. And so it's the full picture of everything that he hasn't been able to stay healthy. And the other thing here, Rich, too, it's easy for us to say it's bad luck, but if you look at history over the last 10 years, and I know we've been over this, but every single quarterback who came into the league with significant injury history in the first round got hurt again. And Bradford in 10, Locker in 11, Griffin in 12, Mariota in 15, Wentz in 16, Watson in 17. All of them carried injury history into the pros. All of them got hurt again as pros. And so, the thing about it is, Rich, when you draft a quarterback that high in the first round, you're literally tying your livelihood to the guy. Whether or not you make it as a head coach, whether or not you make it as a general manager, is literally tied to that person. And so you have to look at everything, and the injuries are certainly a part of the picture with Tua.
Okay, so now the Lions are on the clock at 3. We're now 48 hours away. This is so exciting. Like, we're 2 days away. The speculation is now at a fever pitch, as well as the answers are so close to actually being provided. Lions make this pick? What do you think? Or they trade out?
I think they're having a hard time shopping it. And I think both the Lions and the Giants, believe it or not, despite Dave Gettleman's history, would love to get out and would love to move down. And so, I think they have 2 players, and one's Ohio State corner, Jeff Okudah. The other is Auburn defensive tackle, Derek Brown. That I do think they'd be comfortable taking at 3, but they'd rather get those guys at 5 or 6 than they would take them at 3. And so, they're doing all this. They try to drum up a market for the pick. Again, I think the consensus has been that there's really 4 elite defensive players in this draft. And if they can trade down, let's say, the Dolphins or Chargers, then they would still be in range to get one of those guys. And so I don't think it's that they don't like the guys that are sitting there. I think it's just they feel like the value would be much better if they got those guys a couple picks later down the line and were able to add some capital on the back end.
Where's Isaiah Simmons? When the guy ran at the Combine and performed at the Combine, it was insane, and we all know what he looked like when the chips were down in January. So where is he right now, Albert?
The question is with him what you do with him. And,
right.
Like that, you really have to have a plan. You're not going to line him up as a traditional linebacker. You're not going to line him up as a traditional safety. And, to be fair, a lot of the same questions were asked about Derwin James when he came out. And we saw with the Chargers moving him around what they were able to do. So there's a way to do it, but you just have to have a plan with him. And so, the perception I had going into this process, which was really interesting, was that those 3 Patriot teams, the Patriot-connected teams, the Lions, the Giants, and the Dolphins, would all have a way to use him because those defenses like the movable pieces. I don't get the sense that any of those 3 are going to take him. Even the Dolphins, who I think could wind up passing on a quarterback and taking a tackle, I think he could wind up slipping just a little bit. And to me, I think the floor for him would probably be the Cardinals at number 8. So I don't think he's going to fall too far, but I just think this question of what you do with him and how you use him is an important one. And if you're a rebuilding team, sometimes it can be hard to have that first piece of your rebuild on one side of the ball or the other be a guy who maybe you don't have a defined plan for.
Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show. So let's say it all goes chalk, that everybody picks in the spot where it'll be Detroit picking, and they go with the guy that every mock draft has essentially had going to them since the minute the season ended, and then Darius Slay gets traded, so everybody slots Okudah in there. And then fourth overall, you got the Giants. They take either maybe Simmons, Brown, or they get a protector for Daniel Jones. None of them, the reason why I'm mentioning this, are named Tua or Herbert. Dolphins go 5.
Right.
What do you got for me 48 hours from the draft, Albert?
All right, so like the Dolphins to me are a pressure point there where you hear some stuff that they could take a tackle and maybe come back and get Jordan Love later.
Wow, that would be something.
I think it's been a point of discussion in their organization. I think the idea of even waiting another year has come up. The problem with that is you've got to be bad again, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's a tough pill to swallow if you've already done it once. Where, like, if you're saying, okay, we're going to wait till 2021. Well, you're going to have to be the worst team in the league to get Trevor Lawrence, because I don't think anybody's going to be trading out of 1 next year.
Correct.
And, you know, you're probably going to have to be bad to get any of the quarterbacks at the top of the draft. And so I have a hard time swallowing the Dolphins just completely passing on the position. And I think if they do stick, I think they would take Justin Herbert over Tua. I can't find anybody who thinks they're taking Tua. But I have heard that little kind of nugget there that maybe they take a tackle and think that they can get Jordan Love later on. So definitely some moving pieces with them at 5, and then, of course, at 6 with the Chargers, who I think would be in play for Tua. I think would be in play for Herbert, and, you know, again, another team that you look at and say maybe they take a tackle at 6. So there's a lot of smoke out there on both those teams, but those two are certainly sort of the pressure points for the quarterback position.
Let me make sure I heard that correctly. You, Albert Breer, Sports Illustrated Albert Breer, MMQB Albert Breer, have not spoken to a soul in the last 24 or 48 hours, what have you. You didn't add that time frame. I'm throwing that out there. You haven't spoken to anybody who thinks the Dolphins are taking Tua at 5 if there's a choice between Tua and Herbert. You know, is that correct?
And you know what the beauty of it is, Rich? Maybe that means they are taking him. But I can just tell you, I mean, I've talked to people who know people who've gone through that building. I cannot find anyone who thinks they're taking Tua. And again, this might be the world's biggest smokescreen, and maybe it's Chris Greer's intention to get that out there so they don't have to trade up. But I'm just telling you, like everything that I've heard as far as them at quarterback is pointed away from Tua Tagovailoa. And you know, I the one nugget I can give you here that's sort of interesting, I've heard that Justin Herbert has a fan in that organization. You know who that is?
Stephen Ross?
Dan Marino.
Oh, I've heard of him. Okay. Well, it's better than Laces Out Ray Finkel. What about Marino? Walk me through that one.
Well, I mean, you know, he's done, you know, he's sort of tangentially involved in everything else, and so
sure,
you know, he was part of you know, he'd sort of like jumped into the process and had done some work at the Senior Bowl, and obviously Herbert had a really strong Senior Bowl week. And so I've heard that he likes Herbert. So that's sort of an interesting nugget there. I think, you know, part of it for the Dolphins, of course, is, you know, sort of looking at their 3 first-round picks and knowing the reality is that Joe Burrow is not an option for them, right? Like, so you look at the picture of it, and, you know, I think part of it is they know they have to fill their tackle need, and how do you view Tua's medicals, and then how do you view Jordan Love versus Justin Herbert? It's interesting the way all of those pieces have moved, but I have not talked to anybody who thinks the Dolphins are taking Tua. Again, that might mean they're taking him. We'll see.
Wow. Chris Brockman, could you imagine if that happens on Thursday night? Could you imagine?
How fast do the Chargers get their pick in?
What do you think? Is that a proper supposition that the Chargers would be all over Tua on the spot?
I would just say this: Tom Telesco's as good as anybody at keeping his cards close to the vest, and I have a harder time pegging them. You know, it's just with them, it's like, you know, you hear they like Tua. The medical is a point of discussion. You know, Herbert is obviously could be in play, and they might have to make a decision on him. And I've also heard that they'd like to fill their tackle need. But I mean, the one thing to remember, when my mock's going to go up, I think later today, have them taking Tua. One thing that's sort of interesting is that they pick high in the second round too, and so the Chargers could actually move back into the bottom of the first round if they wanted to go and take care of the tackle need there. And so, I mean, it's fascinating, Rich, because the closer we get to the draft, you start to hear more of this, buzz around both those teams picking at 5 and 6 that they really want to take care of their tackle need, and it's hard to decipher what's smoke and what isn't. But I think it's certainly, you look at the makeup of the class and sort of how you can poke holes in every quarterback who's not named Joe Burrow, and we're going to have a lot of intrigue on Thursday night.
Yeah, I bet. Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show. What are you hearing about the rumor of my next guest, John Lynch, trading one, if not both, of his first-round picks, and who would be the ones moving up? What are you hearing about the big moves that could be made on Thursday night out of the top 10?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the way the Niners draft picks sort of set up, they got the 2 first-rounders. They don't have a 2. They traded that for D Ford, and they don't have a 3 or 4. Those went to Denver in the Emmanuel Sanders deal. And so they'd like to fill in that gap that they have. I think they'd rather trade 31 than 13, but I think they're open to both. And so, I think really sort of this is an organizational thing, and that organization, Rich. Everything they do, very, very well thought out and planned. This is all sort of part of this plan that they put in place when they traded DeForest Buckner, who's one of their best players. And they wanted to build up some draft capital. They knew they weren't going to be able to keep both Buckner and Armstead. And so they chose to keep the guy who cost a little bit less, traded the guy who had a little more trade value. That allowed them to keep Jimmy Ward, their safety also. And now they're resetting sort of their financials because they know with some of the guys they have to pay, they may get a little top-heavy over the next couple of years, so they're going to need to have young talent on the roster. So they're going to try and accumulate some picks. I would say a couple things to watch with them, like Henry Ruggs would be one name to watch, who I've heard they like a lot.
Why not?
And then the left tackle position would be another. Joe Staley, they're expecting him back, but they're eventually going to need to replace him. So I'd watch that position with them as well. And as far as other teams that are going to move, Detroit, of course, is one that could move down. I would put the Raiders into that group, too, as a team that's maybe looking to move down and fill that second round hole. 3 teams looking to move up, Atlanta, Tampa, and Denver. And keep an eye on the Jacksonville Jaguars at 9. They may not only move down, they may wind up moving some assets out to 2021. I've heard some teams around the league sort of refer to them as, quote-unquote, the Trevor Lawrence team that may be doing now what Miami was doing last year, try and set themselves up to get their quarterback in 2021. Wow.
Okay. So that means then why would they hold on to Ngakoue? Certainly when Ngakoue and Tony Khan are just making this even uglier on Twitter. What's going on, right? I mean, and that would make sense about getting Fournette out, just like cleaning it all out, and that would also mean that they would not go after Cam or Jameis, or if Andy Dalton does become expendable in the next 48 hours with the drafting of Burrow, go in that direction, right?
Right, and I think you could get creative with it. One thing I put in my column last night that I thought somebody's just sort of floated this to me, and it would take a lot of doing because you have to get Yannick signed and everything else. But, I mean, how about this? If you can't get a first-round pick for Yannick, what if Yannick is part of a trade down, right? So say, and I'm just going to throw this one out there, say Tampa or Denver want to tackle, okay? So then maybe you package Yannick with the 9th pick, you trade him for whatever it is, 14 or 15, right? And then you get the next year. And then you've added a 1 to kind of your war chest for 2021. I could see them doing some creative things there, again, like the Dolphins did last year, where they sort of recognize they put themselves in this position from a cap standpoint, where it's been hard for them to do anything in 2020. And so maybe 2020 becomes their sort of clear the books year, and they set themselves up for 2021, where maybe they're drafting high enough to get the quarterback of the future, and they've got a lot of other picks to put talent around them.
this stuff. Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. A few minutes left. I've got, again, John Lynch coming up in about a half an hour or so. What did you hear about the mock draft and how that went down yesterday, Albert?
There were some technical difficulties at the beginning. What was less clear was whether or not it was on the team side or the league side. I actually heard there was like some issues with like muting and unmuting, and that's pretty relatable for me because the Zoom meetings and the Microsoft Teams meetings.
Right.
I've made that mistake a few times myself over the last few weeks. I heard it was like a little bit rough at the beginning, but they worked through it. And part of the reason it was rough at the beginning was the league threw a bunch of trades out there to start with. So, like I'd heard, for example, like there were some hiccups when the Cowboys made a mock trade with the Bengals. Don't anybody think that means the Cowboys are trading up for Joe Burrow. I don't want anybody to take that and run with it, but there were some hiccups there early on. And then once they got past that, I heard it was fine after that. Like the technology worked fine and everything else. And so there was just, I think there were some, like a little bit of like let's get used to this early on. And I think we had to throw some curveballs in there. There were a few issues early on, but it felt to me like, having talked to people in the aftermath, that, once they got through the first half hour or so, things were pretty smooth. And so the guys I talked to at least are confident that the technology is okay. The one thing that they're a little kind of iffy on is, are the trades going to be smooth? And how often is the league going to have to stop the clock to facilitate trades? But other than that, it sounds like it went okay.
So from your conversations, whoever was in charge of the mock draft to get everybody together through this entire process in the deep end of the pool by not just having Cincinnati select Joe Burrow, they went ahead and had a team down in the 20s try and pull off a monster huge trade for number 1 overall and see how that worked with teams communicating with each other? Is that what they did?
Yeah, I mean, that was what I understand. I heard like the first few picks, they were throwing trades out there, and okay, how would we deal with this? How would we deal with that? I guess what you're saying is like the proverbial like Julio Jones trade or the Patrick Mahomes
I'm just saying
trade,
it's
right?
like what you could crawl before you walk, but I understand that might not happen if the Bengals decide to pull off the huge trade at the very top. You got to get that out of the way, I guess. That would be the ultimate shocker that you have to prepare for, that as soon as the commissioner steps up to his basement podium and says, I've put in a load of laundry, the Bengals are on the clock, that at that point in time, anything can happen. So, yeah, I guess they went complex right off the bat. And if somebody, I'm serious, if a general manager is sitting at home, again, telling whomever, what groceries are needed, and they forget to mute their phone, and Jerry Jones is trying to talk to Mike Brown, that might be difficult. I can kind of pick that up about. But we also heard there was a bandwidth problem. I don't know what that meant. I'm not an IT or an AV expert, but that's what we were seeing on Twitter and whatever.
I wonder how much of that, I don't know how much of that was the muting issue, and I don't know. That part of it, I don't know. I do know this, though. I mean, there are going to be a lot of people on there. I mean, the way it's going to set up is they're all going to be in a Microsoft Teams meeting. And, again, I don't know what the capabilities of these programs are offhand or anything like that, but my understanding of it, the way they're going to set it up is that each team's going to be able to designate 3 people, right, that are going to be in this Microsoft Teams meeting. I don't know how many people the league's going to have involved, but if you do 3 times 32, that's 96. So it stands to reason there will be well over 100 people in that room. And so, certainly that's something that I think was something they wanted to work through. And the reason you have 3 from each team, of course, is because, well, what happens if someone's internet goes down, right? You want each team to have multiple backups. So that's part of it. And then all of that, by the way, is going to be backed up by a conference call that these guys are going to be on. And, each team is going to be able to designate one decision maker, and that person is going to have an IT guy on hand. And so they built fail-safes into it. But, I mean, I certainly think that the bandwidth issue, I don't know enough about computers, but I do know this, the more people that are in a room, the more it would slow it down, I would think, the more issues you might have. So that was sort of the idea of having the mock draft, was to put everybody in that room and see how it works out.
All right, last couple quick hitters for you, Albert. I appreciate the time. How many quarterbacks go first round Thursday night? I give you the over under 4.5. You take the over, the under.
Oh, I'll take the under on that.
You will.
I thought you were going to say 3.5. That's where I would set it. I would say the three guys we all expect to go will go, even if Tua slips a little bit. And then Jordan Love, I think, is 50-50. So I would say right now I would take the under on 4.5.
But you'd take the what on 3.5? What'd you do there?
I mean, over just because I think I'll take the over just because I think, like, if Love is available when you get down to, and I can't find teams that really are over the moon for him. But of course, like, if you weren't, you keep that quiet. I just, like, if they were, like, I would think, like, if you really loved him that much and you were at the top of the second round, you might want to trade into the bottom of the first round so you can get the fifth-year option on him. And so I would say over, but I think Jordan Love's a real close one. It sort of reminds me of DeShone Kizer a little bit a few years ago, where everyone assumed that he was going in the first round, but nobody really was, like, head over heels for him. And so he's sliding into the middle of the second round. Like, that's sort of what this feels like to me.
Well, it sounds like for you, what you're saying, and then I will say goodbye to you and send you off into your good day, that Tua might be close enough within hailing distance of the Patriots, and Jordan Love might be available when they're on the clock Thursday night. Is that possible from what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's definitely possible. And wouldn't this just be what would happen, Rich, is that Bill Belichick gets Tua Tagovailoa, and then he's healthy for 20 years. Isn't that exactly how it's going to?
Well, yeah. I mean, just as Brady leaves.
He's going to slide right into Bill's lap. Bill won't have to trade up for him.
Yeah.
And he's going to stay healthy for 20 years, and Bill's going to be winning Super Bowls into his 80s. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Albert Breer, you called it. You called your shot. Thanks for the call, Albert. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Best to everyone in your family. Be well, sir.
Thanks. Stay safe, Rich, and good luck on Thursday night.
Right back at you. Right back at you. That's Albert Breer. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.